Hello, it is World Wide Web Wednesday, April 7th, 2021. Steve Sipress here. And yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, the Supreme Court came down with its ruling in the case of Google versus Oracle. Two tech heavyweights battling it out in a case that first came about 10 years ago, where the jury ruled in Google's favor, and then Oracle appealed, and it was overturned in the circuit court. And now the Supreme Court overturned that, put it back to the original ruling that Google was under the fair use doctrine. Google legally was allowed to use part of the Oracle Java code upon which Google built its Android mobile platform. And so Oracle was seeking something like $8 billion in damages. And of course, Google's made a ton more than that off of having the Android operating system. But this ruling, which is a little bit of a strange ruling, but it's a ruling nonetheless, says that fair use can be applied even though Oracle has the copyright on this code. Google was under its fair use to use it to build their own platform. The thing is, fair use, if you're familiar with it, we use it as business owners. If we're going to, write a review, we can put like a quote from the book, and then and use that in our blog or use that in a post on social media. We can quote things. We don't take the entire book, but we can take a paragraph or a little bit of it. That's known as fair use. You're not using all of it. We can use part of videos, images, all kinds of stuff that even though there are copyright holders, you can use a part of it because that makes it easier for the world to exist, right? So it happens in the medical world all the time. Otherwise, we'd pretty much never have a cure for anything because doctors that are working on a cure for cancer are piggybacking on every other doctor's work who is working on a cure for cancer. And they're taking a little bit of this and mixing it with a little bit of that and trying a little bit of this. Everybody doesn't have to start from scratch. That's the whole point. So today's ruling was just that, saying, look, Google or anybody else doesn't have to start from scratch every time they want to build a new platform. They can use these existing, what they call these snippets of code, these little APIs in this case, which is the API is the application programming interface, I believe it's called, which is way that different applications, different programs talk to each other with that API code. So you'll often hear, as a business owner, your web guy will say, I need the API code in order to put in this software to have it work with your website. And this, that. The API code is how different programs talk to each other. So the ruling was Google was within a fair game under the fair use doctrine, was in its rights to just use Oracle's code, not have to pay them anything, not have to ask permission first, just to go ahead and, as Oracle says, to steal it and build their own platform from which they've made many billions of dollars and continue their domination of the internet, as Google, of course, has. Now, here's a little detail that makes this, in my opinion, a little strange type of ruling. This little snippet of API code that the Supreme Court said no problem, that's fair use, 11,500 lines of code. 11,500 lines of code, no problem. Even though Oracle had the copyright on those 11,500 lines of code, it's not a big enough deal that Google, just with no permission at all, just took the whole thing and used it for their own benefit. So this is good news, of course, for all programmers, because now you can legally, ethically, according to the Supreme Court, steal, use, whatever you want to call it, snippets, pieces, 11,500 lines of somebody else's code to build your thing, which means it's good for entrepreneurs. More and more stuff will be built, less of a barrier to entry. Can you imagine if every upcoming software programmer who wanted to come up with some new application or some new program or new anything had to start paying out big money to the big tech giants every time they wanted to use their APIs, which are routinely used by programmers to, again, interface with different programs. So it's good in that sense. It's good for the world in general. It's good for innovation. More things will come about, less barrier to entry, more programs, more inventions, more new things, more innovation. What it goes against is the holder of copyright. That, wow, so if you really invent and write some great piece of code, and you put in all the time and money and effort, pay all the people you have to have all this expertise, and these people that put together this code, I'm guessing, are not just, teenage kids in their basement. These are the very best from Stanford, MIT, and whatever, sitting there for days, weeks, months, however long it took to put together these 11,500 lines of code. And then Supreme Court says, sorry, copyright holder, even though you did all that and then you copyrighted it, and so you had to pay lawyers and register and did all that kind of stuff. Too bad. Google or anybody else doesn't have to pay you a dime to use it. So good in some sense, bad in some other sense. What are you going to do? That's the ruling. That's the World Wide Web news on World Wide Web Wednesday that I'm sharing with you. So use it as you will. If you're having some programming done, this is likely good news. If your programmer who's working on some software for you has told you that, hey, I don't know, it's going to be expensive because we're going to have to build this from scratch. I don't know if we're going to be able to use this. You'd have to pay them a lot of money. Maybe not, thanks to this ruling. Although still the entire internet is still a wild, wild west because there was no definitive ruling on at what point the copywriter can demand that you ask permission or get payment on these APIs that are constantly, routinely being used. There was no general ruling on that. So expanded the fair use doctrine, but nobody really knows how much. So I'm guessing lots more work, lots more money for the lawyers. We'll be battling it out in the courts for years and possibly decades to come. This case took a decade. Can you imagine? Anyway, you don't have to imagine. It happened. That'll do it for World Wide Web Wednesday. Thanks, everyone, being here live. Thanks for watching on the replay. I will catch you again tomorrow. On Throwback Thursday, I'm going to throw it back to a story about my college days and how I graduated with a college degree and how that is appropriate today, what's going on in the world, and what's going on with your business. Catch you then. Over and out. Bye-bye.